Another thing is if you think of Black women in the media, we're either mean or we are hysterical. We're really funny. We're overly animated. We're really living our lives out loud. Or we are like the drill sergeant type, telling everybody do this, do that, and this and that, even the Latinas. So I have a Latina friend who's an introvert, and she said that people expect her to be Sofia Vergara from Modern Family. That spicy, sexy, Latina, that's what they are looking for. And they don't get that from her.
Now, I'm Black. Every Black man I interact with is not trying to punch me in the face or yell at me, right?
Yeah.
Every Latina woman I discuss with is not trying to seduce me in some way, shape, or form, right? I welcome guys to another episode of Evolution Podcast. And today I have a special guest, and today I have with me Jeri. Now, today's topic, I just want to give you a heads up as to what we're going to be covering. This is a topic that some people might consider controversial. This is a topic that some people might consider not controversial, but I can tell you this: nothing is off the table. We're going to be talking about everything from inclusivity. We're going to be talking about everything from race. We're talking about everything from diversity, and we're also going to be talking about how it applies in the workplace. So go ahead and sit down. And right now, my guest is going to introduce herself. So Jeri, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, I am Jeri Bingham. Happy to be here. I'm the host of Hushloudly, a podcast and brand that talks about all things introversion.
So just out of curiosity, because I read the article and checked out a few bits of the podcast. I guess what inspired you to start the Hush Loudly podcast?
Well, it's kind of an interesting journey. I am in a doctoral program. I hope to finish this year. And in the course section, so I was taking a class about student development. And we had an assignment or activity where we were talking about students who go away to college for the first time for a bachelor's degree program. And we were talking about social identity, racial identity, and all of these things that come into play when you're away from home at the first time and how you find community. And we were talking about peer pressure and all of this. And I said, oh, I didn't really have any of that. And so the professor says, why? And I said, I don't know. I think maybe because I'm just an introvert and I was very comfortable with myself and very good at entertaining myself. And I didn't need others in the way that other students maybe did, where they fell to peer pressure and other things that weren't good for them. And so the whole class got quiet. And then I just kept talking about it. And then one thing led to another. And I'm seeing that other people have these same experiences. And so it just seemed to be a thing. And I said, well, maybe that's what my dissertation topic should be about. And I was talking to my friend who's in the radio business. And he was just asking me, Jeri, I know you're at school. What's your dissertation? So I told him. And then he said, I think that ought to be a podcast. And I said, nobody cares about that. Nobody wants to hear me talk about introverts. And he said, I think you are wrong. I think that people will want to hear. And that's where it started. So I really owe it to him for making me see it differently, and that it would be a platform to not only reach people and educate and inform, but just something to have fun and to build community.
I love it. So what's your experience been like so far? Since having the podcast, and when did you start the podcast?
So I started the podcast in 2019, and it's been really, really great. And so that has led to me offering all kinds of panel discussions and events and activities, and writing articles, and then speaking to people, speaking to companies, speaking to individuals. So it has opened the door and led to more than I ever imagined. And of course, other countries and just, I think, opening a dialogue and having people talk about and feel seen and feel heard, which is also under the whole DEI movement. And that's been what's been so rewarding to me when I talk to people and they say, hey, your interview with so-and-so did this for me. Your panel discussion on this helped me go in and talk to my boss about during my performance review when they were questioning me about why I was so quiet. So that has been what's so meaningful and what has been so amazing and that has come out of this journey.
So, what tips do you typically give? Do you typically give introverts to, I say, help them be, be more of themselves and be a little bit more, I would even say, extroverted per se?
Well, I think that you have to really understand yourself and know your strengths and know why you would be valuable in the workplace and hone in on those. So, to introverts are typically the best listeners and very observant. And so I tell introverts to use that to your advantage. So if you're in a conference room and you are watching the body language, because that's what we do, you are really listening, you are looking at social cues, you are also noticing what's just going on in the environment and the team dynamics and all of that. Walk away from that and talk to the person who needs to know that. So there have been lots of times with me where usually I'm reporting to the president or the CFO, or the CEO, and they will leave the conference room or the meeting thinking it went well because they are on stage, they are performing, they are doing their thing, and they are using their charisma and gift of gab to do whatever their goal is for the day. Meanwhile, I'm sitting back watching how everything is playing out. And so I can go to them later and say, no, it really didn't go that well. And this is why, because I noticed this, this, and this, and who was talking and what seemed to aggravate people or what seemed to bring fear to people or what people were most engaged about. And then we take that information and then we can build from that. Maybe it's a communication message or whatever strategies to combat whatever problems or issues that people were having. And so for introverts, I push them to think about what it is that's unique about them that they can build on and use to their advantage in the workplace. I had mentioned earlier about performance reviews. And so this had happened to me earlier in my life where people would say to me, you're so quiet. We want you to talk more. That never really made sense to me because I talk when I have something to say. I am processing, and like many introverts, maybe the words aren't coming to me in the moment, but I am building off of this moment. I'm processing all the interaction, all the stimulation, everything that's being said. And sometimes the best ideas come to me when I leave the room, not when I'm in the room. And so what I find a good piece of advice for introverts is to ask questions. A lot of us typically are very curious. And so you can ask the right question that will also show that you are engaged because I think there's an assumption that people think you're not paying attention, you're not with it, maybe you're not as smart because you're not talking. So I wish our society could get away from that. Just because you are talking the most or are the loudest does not mean you know everything and that you have all the answers. And just because you are quiet doesn't mean that you do not have the answers and that you don't know anything. We all are different. And the way we process data as it's coming in and the way we process the world and the energy around us just may be a little different. And so I coach introverts to just be mindful that people are perceiving you inaccurately, and so you have to work, unfortunately, to fix that, to combat that if you want to get the raises and the promotions and you want to be selected for key assignments. I'm not telling you to be an extrovert. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying figure out your strengths and figure out a way to show what you got, your superpower in the workplace. And so that it is something that is impressive and important and meaningful for the boss or whoever needs to have this information. Because it's like the best balance I feel like is a team of extroverts and introverts. Because the extroverts typically are the risk takers and they are ready to jump and they're ready to make decisions. But are their decisions based on data? And that's where your introverts come into play because we are highly analytical. And so that comes into play. We're the big thinkers. And so that's where it's such a beautiful balance when you have a team of both, if the extroverts are listening to the introverts. And on the other hand, I always say this about myself with being an introvert is sometimes I'm sitting back and thinking and pondering and processing, and I may miss an opportunity because I'm still thinking about it. And that's why I value the extroverts in my life because they're ready to go. And so it's great to have that balance where you have a teammate or someone who says, let's go let's do this. And then you have the introvert thinking about it. Yep, let's figure this out. Let's find out what the issues might be, what the challenges might be, what the obstacles might be. But then together you decide, let's go on and take the leap and make this decision. So I just urge introverts to uh, really think about what that unique thing is that they have, because we're all very different. Nobody's the same. And use it to your ability. Use it to the best of your ability.
Interesting. Okay. Okay. I like that. Now, when reading the room, I'm very curious because you say, you'd have the extroverts, the executives making the presentations, and you're thinking, wow, best presentation ever. I did so good. Everyone loves it. But then you come around and you're like, hold up a minute. Hold on a minute. You kind of bombed here and here and here and here. What are those things per se that you're looking at when you're reading the room that's giving you those cues that like, hey, your audience may be engaging with you in some way, shape, or form, but you don't have, the full commitment.
Well, it's funny when you're the CEO, people know you're the boss. So they're going to act like they're engaged, right? They're not going to be looking at their phones and looking distracted and chatting and doing all of those things, but it could be a performance. They could be looking that way just to please the boss. And so the boss is feeling that, feeding that. And I'm not to say, and that's not to say that all bosses are extroverts, because they're not. Half the world is introverted, but we can get back to that. But just looking as the introvert, um, watching people's faces and watching how they respond and how they react, looking at the questions that they ask. Are there any questions? Looking at what are they jotting down? What are they writing? What seems to really be resonating with them? And then, of course, if there's any sort of side conversations or if there are any weird looks or if two people are looking at each other when this statement is made, you can tell very much from that look whether this is a look of wonder and delight or whether this is a look of fear, like, what the heck is he talking about? And so I am sitting back looking at all of that as well as the body language when they enter the room. So me, I'm that introvert that comes into the room early. I like to be places early. I like to find my place, whether it's on the side, on the front, whatever, and really embrace the environment. So I'm watching even when people come in, what are they doing? What are they talking about? Who are they sitting with? What does it look like? What are their faces looking like? And then even when we leave and after the meeting. So is everyone running into their offices and closing doors? Is everyone out in the hallway talking about and talking about what resonated with them? Are plans starting to form? Are groups starting to form because people are excited? So all of that comes into my reading the room. So it's not just, I guess, in the room, it's the before, during, and right after, just watching people because people show you who they are in their body language. They do. You can see when a person is happy, sad, fearful. You can see that. And maybe that's more people who are more intuitive. And I am intuitive. So the INFP, the introversion, intuition, all of that in terms of the Myers Briggs classification. And so that is one skill that I have that I'm proud of. And I think many introverts have the same thing because we are sitting back and listening and observing versus talking.
Okay. So now let's say, you're discussing that with that introverted CEO and, they just did that presentation, right? Now just kind of walk me through the process as to, gave the hoorah, you read the room, you're like, okay, it's all fake. Everybody's pretending, right? And now you in that room with the CEO, you're talking to them, right? And you're like, hey, I saw the room and I noticed that people were not paying attention to. I mean, they were engaging, but honestly, you didn't have the room. What are the key areas that you tell them to work on in the future when they're on stage giving those presentations so that they can ensure that they have, you know, the audience's authentic attention?
And it may not be their presentation, it may be the content of the message. So they may not need to work on their presentation skills because their presentation skills might be awesome. But what it is that I'm usually coaching them or talking to them about is the message and the weight of the message and the way the message was received. And so moving forward, we know that we have to combat this. We may need to write a statement to clear up some misunderstandings. May need to have a part two. We may need to have an activity or something to give people the opportunity to ask the questions that they weren't able to ask in that room. Maybe people were fearful of asking questions because they didn't know how it would look to you or to their peers, if they stepped out on a limb. So it's that kind of conversation that I would have with the person. And I have to say, first, you have to build trust. Because if this was a new CEO who did not trust me, did not know my worth, did not see my value, it might not go over as well. So this is something that comes with a relationship that builds after you show them who you are, after they feel comfortable and feel that they can take your advisement about what you've seen. So one thing I tell introverts always is to get a big win in like the first 30 to 60 days if you can. Show your stuff as soon as you get to that job. And the way I do that is if you know you're going to apply to work at this company, you got to go work for Mac or Apple. Apple is a bad example because it's too big. Say you're going to go work at this company. You know that 30 days in advance or 60 days in advance of the interview. Do your research. Find out everything you can about that company and start building your strategies in your head of what you can do once you get that role. So, of course, the website, that's the first place. Look at the About Us page. Look at leadership. Look at the CEO. Google that person. See what they like or don't like. Look at the company's vision, mission, values. What are they talking about? See, are they really living true to that? So go to their social media. What are they talking about on social media? Also, Google the leadership of social media. You can find out so much about a person at no cost to yourself that this is valuable intel that you can use before the interview. Then once you get the interview and get the job, hopefully, you already know coming in what you had in mind. So even where I'm working right now, I did that. I came and drove around the campus before the interview. I drove around the neighborhood to learn about what's missing, what could they use, what could I bring, what contacts did I have that I could use to bring value to this organization. I talked about all of that in my interview. Now, to some, that may feel like a waste of time, but not to me. And the return on the investment is I got the job. But learning as much as you can about the audience and the target and who you are interviewing with and who you will be working for, I think is an incredible way to show and bring your value immediately. So when you start in those first 30 days, you already have a plan. So I know I'm going to reach out to this company and someone I know and do this. I'm going to bring a food truck festival. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do blah, blah, blah. And so when you start to execute those things. That's how you get your big win in 30 days, in 60 days. And usually when that happens, people will, I'll say, bring the wall down a bit and open up to you and give you more and trust you more. Because one of the things that I talk about with introverts, especially being a Black introvert, and I know we're going to talk about this later, but when you're an introvert and people can't read you, it leaves room for misinterpretation. It leaves room for them to guess things that could be inaccurate about you. So because I'm quieter, meaning I'm not shy, because shy is different, but because I'm quiet and when I come into an office, I'm not talking about myself. I'm not talking about my family, my friends. I'm just not, because I just don't want to. I just don't. And I may have no photos in my office. I'm not doing any of that. It makes some people uncomfortable because they want to get to know you. They want to be your friend. They want to get to know you in a way that you may not want people to get to know you. And so that is an issue that many introverts have, in that we have to make other people feel comfortable with us. So I'm going back to the 30, 60-day thing, so I come in, I'm quiet, I'm friendly, I'm answering questions, I'm going to all the meetings, I'm giving my input and feedback as the person in my role should do. I'm leading, I'm managing, I'm guiding, I'm doing all of that. But the personal side of Jeri is not coming out. And so then people are like, well, we don't really know much about her. She doesn't want to go to lunch with us. She's not hanging out with us. She's not coming in the cafeteria every day. So how do we get to know her? And that is a problem for many introverts. And when you tie it with our other identities, so when you are a Black female introvert, such as myself, I believe that the whole angry Black woman comes into play because the majority's perception of the Black woman becomes real when you aren't really sharing who you are. So when I walk in and I'm quiet and I'm Black, then I think that the automatic assumption is, oh, she's me. And the reason why I think that is because I have heard this in my career probably 40 or 50 times. And the way people say it to me is they'll say, after I've been there maybe like 60 days, they'll say, "You are so sweet. You are so nice. I thought you were so mean." And so I always say, why would you think I was mean? Because mean is a very interesting word. I just don't think mean fit any part of me. And so I'll ask, well, why would you think I'm mean? People can never articulate it. They always say, well, I don't know. I just thought you were mean. You kept to yourself. And I said, well, that doesn't mean mean, but I think that's the stereotype. So because you can't figure me out and you've seen these media portrayals of the Black woman being mean, you automatically associate that with me. And another thing is, if you think of Black women in the media, we're either mean or we are hysterical. We're really funny. We're overly animated. We're really living our lives out loud. Or we are like the drill sergeant type, telling everybody do this, do that, and this and that. And so if I don't fit any of those molds, then they question who I am. And then they sum me up as something that I'm not. So it's all of this whole triple barreled experience that I think Black introverted women deal with. I think Black introverted men, they deal with it in another way. I think Black introverted gays, they deal with it in another way, and any of the conversations that I've had with people, even the Latinas. So I have a Latina friend who's an introvert, and she said that people expect her to be Sofia Vergara from Modern Family. That's spicy, sexy, Latina, that's what they are looking for. And they don't get that from her. Go ahead.
So my question for you is, okay, so the stereotypical, the media portrays the stereotypical angry Black woman. The media portrays the stereotypical, as you said with your friend, they expect the Sofia Vergara, spicy Latina. Now, I'm Black. I know a lot. I mean, majority of everyone I know is Black. And I don't see that media, the media portraying, right? In the sense as to, every Black man I interact with is not trying to punch me in the face or yell at me, right?
Yeah.
Every Latina woman I discuss with is not trying to seduce me in some way, shape, or form, right? So, why do you think the media? Because I think a lot of things exist in the media. It's like a lot of stereotype is from what people see, not from what they experience,
I,
right?
yes.
So, why do you think the media portrays this, this image per se?
Well, I think that, and when I say media, I'm even talking about television programs that were out there when we were growing up. So, in the 70s and 80s, and when you saw a Black woman, like Nell Carter on that show, I can't think of her name, so That's My Mama, or whatever the shows were, that wasn't it. But all these different shows, they were these drill sergeant type Black women who were running the household, whether they were the maid or the nanny or whatever. And I think social media, I think reality TV. So those are very influential as well, as there are people who may not have grown up with Black Americans. They may not know how we roll. They may not have ever gone to school with us until they get to college. And so their perception of us is what they see on TV, in reality TV, uh, in movies, in television programs, and on the news, where obviously Black people in general on the news are not always painted in the best lights. So I think that there
True.
seems to be a lot of attention on Black crimes and in things that are crimes that are committed by Black Americans or Black people or brown people. And I just think that all of that, the culmination of all of that, builds this image of what the Black person or the Black woman is. I can't tell you why. I don't know how that started, with the media and TV. I don't know how that started. Uh, but it's here. It's our reality. And unfortunately, it's something that we have to deal with, especially when we're coming into the workplace.
So I this question is a question that I have for you per se, in the sense to the stereotype already exists, right? And neither you nor I can change it because it's a systematic. I would say it's been decades or centuries of ingrained. Um, how would I call it? I don't want to use the word programming, but it's kind of like programming. Now, let's just say there's an individual right now who is probably experiencing that, where people are categorizing them in some category that they are not, right? And usually there is, when people call you something that you know deeply, deeply that you are not, and they keep repeating it over and over and over again, it builds a sense of frustration, right? So how would you say someone in that situation, how would you recommend that they navigate it? Is it a, what, I'm going to respond to them? Or would you say, I'm going to be the better person and just move on and just obviously let my actions speak for themselves?
So are you saying that someone in the workplace is calling you a name?
Well, let's just say the experience in the stereotype.
Well, I think people of color experience all kinds of microaggressions, whether people say things intentionally or not. We can see by certain behaviors and decision making that they are grouping us in a certain category and stereotyping us in some way. I think that it's important to talk about it in a way that's comfortable for you. So if you are uncomfortable with what someone is saying or doing, and you think that it is sort of like an attack on your character or your identity in some way, I think that you would need to start by asking questions, like pushing back, make people feel uncomfortable the way they make you feel uncomfortable. So if someone says to me, "Why are you so quiet?" And it's the way you say it. So if you say it like, "Jerry, why are you so quiet?" I feel like that's a more innocent approach, and I may have a meaningful conversation with you. But if you say it to me more accusatory and more judgmental, like, "Why are you so quiet?" Then I may ask you, "Why do you care?" And so whatever they say in response, then I will say something back, but it will throw it back on them. What difference does it make? I think that it's like with each person, whether it's a bully or whatever, it's somebody that's just curious. I think that we can be very intentional with how we respond, and that may open up the lines of communication, whether they are good or bad. And I think that it could open up to having some meaningful conversation about the fact that we're different. Maybe I'm not supposed to be talking like you are. You love to talk. Go ahead, have at it. Maybe I am not as talkative, but why would you hold that against me? Why are you judging me? Why are you treating me in this way? So I think if I'm understanding your question, that is how I would respond to someone saying things to me that I think are like a microaggression or something that led me to believe that they were judging my character or identity because they were completely wrong.
I'm going to say something, and which some people might agree and some people might disagree. The people in the comment section always seem to rip me apart every time I every time a post comes out.
Okay.
So it's like I know someone's gonna make a comment on this, and feel free to. So my first experience with um I would say stereotype or racism was back in 2015. And I remember this was he was a supervisor at the time, and I was new to the position. I was excited, and I was in the position for about 8 months. And in the time in which I was in that position, I ended up finding this out a few months before I left, that apparently he had some prejudice, and this does not apply to every. It does not apply, and this is a huge minority of people, and I think people who believe in his ideology is a very small minority,
Okay.
and he had this, how would I call it? I would say a master plan. So in the position I was in, I was an evaluator, I was an instructor. My job was to train students, and usually, if you have a failure rate of up to 10 students, you are reevaluated if you should actually continue the position, right? So I remember every student that I signed off or I basically sent to take an exam would fail. 8, 9. And then it was weird because they would fail at things in which when they came back to get reevaluated, it'd be like, no, I never mattered to begin with. And I remember the camel that I'd say the straw that broke the camel's back was um this one day when I sent a student in to take a test, because this they take the test individually. And one of the supervisors called me in and he was like, hey, just want to let you know that your student's gonna fail. And I'm like,
Okay.
why is Mr. gonna fail?
Going to fail. He was predicting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he's like, it's gonna fail. He's gonna fail. I'm like, the student just got in like 10 minutes ago. There's no way that he's gonna fail. And he's like, then he kind of told me what had been going on. Right. And I'm grateful for that. And what ended up happening was I ended up, the student ended up failing, as he called it, right? But then there was this master plan to get all my students to fail, for me to go reevaluate and lose my license to practice, right? Now, then again, a lot of people are going to listen to this and go, man, bad on this guy. What this guy did was bad. This is where my controversial take comes in. I am actually grateful for that experience. Okay. And here's why. Because up until then, I was very naive as to the workplace, as to the environment I was in, right? And most of my driving forces at the time was very much just passion and believing that the world is all bed and roses, basically. And after that experience happened, I ended up having to leave that job, and I was unemployed for a few weeks. And then luckily, I started a new position. And within 6 months, boom, it was a much better experience. I made way more money. But that experience right now still resonates in my mind, because something similar happened just about 2 years ago, 3 years ago, in another position that I had, cost me a few six figures. And I write down those experiences. I write it down and I keep it to myself. I'm like, this person did this to me. It may be because of the color of my skin. It may not be, but let's assume it is. If it is, right? I can either come out and say I am like, this person is because of this person. I never achieved this. Or I can come to a position where I keep climbing to the top where that never happens again. Right. So for me, when it happened, when when the first instance happened, I was like, you know what? I'm going to make sure that I'm in a position in the future that this never happens to me again. And when I went to the next job, within 6 months, I was at the top of the company. I was the highest paid employee at the time, because I made sure that that would never happen again. Then I kind of relaxed a little bit, right? Because the thing is, this is, what they say is, pressure builds diamonds. And, you know, have you ever had something happen where, you learn lessons based off of the pain that you experience,
Yeah.
right? And for me, I always look at the experiences with this guy and, other experiences that happen after, as more or less a teaching moment for me to understand that you are in a position where someone has control over you to put you, to either make you lose a job, to either make you uncomfortable because you choose to be. The only way to, how would I put it? I've always seen hate and, stereotypes and whatever as a motivating force for me to climb to the top. Right. And it's always been that way for me, because for me, it's like when you tell me, hey, man, you can do it. It's good. But when I know that there is somebody out there that is genuinely plotting against me, I'm like, oh, nice. It's competition. Let's do it. right? And I think that's the mindset my father always taught me, and he kind of instilled in me. He was like, "You're gonna face challenges. People are not gonna like you, but that's a good thing because the more people that don't like you, the more hate you get, the more fire you have." And he gave me this instance, and I think I was 13. I never understood it. And where I'm from, usually I'm from Nigeria, so I'm from a third world country. So we get do you know what it's like a jerry can? It's like a fuel thing where you kind of get fuel in a hose and then you put it in. It's kind of like an old school way of getting fuel in your car. And one day I was doing it and I accidentally kind of ingested a little bit of fuel and I started coughing and I thought I was gonna die, but I'm still here. And he said, and then he kind of gave me that as a lesson. He was like, "Fuel is toxic for you," and I was like, "He's like, it's bad for you." I was like, "Yeah, yeah, okay." And he was like, "But the car needs it to keep moving." And I was like, "Yeah, okay. What's your point?" But I didn't say that. What's your point in that way? But I'm like, in my head, I'm like, where's this going? But he kind of made me understand that the bad things that happen to you is toxic if you consume it,
Mm.
right? So if you consume it and you ingest it, now that is going to, it's like basically drinking poison. But if you use it as fuel, it take you miles. So it was kind of the same thing with the fuel in the car. It's like if you drink it, it will kill you. But if this car uses it and burns it, it's like hate and stereotype and all that. It's for you to use. It's fuel for you to burn to move forward, not for you to consume and internalize. And I was like, I never understood that. I never understood it until a few years later, after he passed away, was when I remember that conversation. I was like, because I felt so much anger, so much, I would say, and then I just remembered, I was like, this anger, I'm internalizing it and it's going to consume me. It's poison. But then I was like, but it's fuel. And then I would wake up early morning thinking about everything that happened because I was like, man, all right, now I'm energized. Now I'm burning the fuel. So that's just for me and how I kind of process stereotypes. Because I mean, oh God, every day it's gonna happen. But I just started really looking at it as, okay, good. You just gave me more fuel for the tank. Let's burn it and keep going. Because you know, I'm kind of going on a ramble here, but obviously let's kind of go
I
get
love
the pot.
that story, and you have touched me. So thank you and your dad. I love the way it was described to you, and it really hits home and touches me. And I hope all of your listeners, because you're right, we are surrounded by haters, and everyone does not want you to succeed. Everyone is not your friend. Everyone is not going to be your supporter. But what are you going to do with that? Are you going to listen to all that hate they give? Are you going to believe all of that mess? And when they call you names or they treat you as if you're less than, are you going to believe that? Or are you going to do something about it and keep on moving forward? So I love that.
Yeah,
Thank
thank you.
you.
I just figured I've never shared that story in a podcast before, but that is, because a few people have asked me a few times, like, what drives you, like, what moves you, and I remember I said one time, I'm like, the more hate I get, the more I get energized, right?
So they took
And
it the wrong way. No,
they took
it-
it the wrong way.
of the story. Right. Right.
Yeah. So it's and it's funny. It's like life is more. There's life has its happy moments, but it has 75% of it is just like moments of like, oh my God, you know? And I believe the pain is here to give us that fuel to keep moving forward to become the best versions of ourselves. That's basically my take from it and my life experiences. So hopefully guys that help you. And I know it's a little bit of an interesting take. And if you guys want to go ahead and roast me in the comment section, feel free to do that. I'll be looking forward to it. But I want to go ahead and talk about this article and the inclusivity includes Black introverts. Okay, and basically this is an article that you wrote about. Basically Black introverted leaders in a predominantly extroverted society workplace, and you pretty much covered it. But you
Yeah.
covered why you started the podcast. But what was the driving force behind this article?
Uh, my experiences, and so being in leadership and being in different roles where I could clearly see that I was being treated differently because I thought I was Black and introverted. And so that is just what propelled me to write that. So I know as a Black person or a person of color, as soon as you enter the place, people start sizing you up just by the way you look, the color of your skin. So you have to combat that. You have to deal with that. You have to uh, uh, always go in with that knowledge, knowing that is happening, and their perception of you, good or bad, is just kind of hovering over you. And so when you add the introversion, so you're more on the quiet side and not sharing personal things or the things that your teammates or colleagues want to know about you, I feel like that's a second thing, a second cloud that's over your head. And you have to figure out how to manage that because we live in a world that celebrates, that values extroverts, the most extroverted person. It doesn't mean that they have any substance. They can be an idiot and they can just be very gregarious and charismatic and outgoing. And so they will be seen in a different light, a positive light, versus the introvert who may be brilliant and may be hysterical and may have all of these attributes that people like in our society. But because it's clouded under this stereotype and stigma that's tied to a quieter person, it can never come out. It could be held against you. And I was seeing this in certain jobs where I knew I was doing this well. And I knew this was the way it should be. And my colleagues and other people were like, oh my God, you're the bomb, this, that, and the other. But then I noticed I couldn't move up the ladder, or I was being questioned differently, or I was being made to jump through extra hoops and do additional tasks and responsibility to kind of prove and overprove I was as if I didn't deserve to be there. And so it had happened so frequently that I just felt like I needed to write about it. And that's really where that article came from.
And how did I'm very curious. How did people receive the article per se? What was the feedback you got?
The article was so well received. It was I heard from so many people of color, especially women who were saying, I thought it was just me. This has happened to me all my life. I'm so happy that someone else can talk about it and articulate it in a way that is meaningful and makes sense, and then be out on a platform where maybe others can see it. So it was all positive feedback. I remember one person, which I know you're not supposed to really pay attention to all the comments, but one person said something on LinkedIn. They said something uh, it was something about the Black. Why does Black have to come into everything? Why does Blackness have to be a part of everything? And so I had to respond, that's who I am. That's who you see when I walk in a place. That's part of my story, my identity, my life. So that is probably some person who I guess is tired of reading about Black Lives Matter and tired of seeing people saying I'm the first Black this and tired of seeing the first Black CEO and all of that. And so that is their issue. But I did have to respond to that because I guess they were saying we're all the same. We're not. But that's what their mindset is. We're all the same. No one's better than the other or whatever, whatever. But then that whole brings on the whole conversation of privilege, entitlement, and all of these things that someone who hasn't walked in my shoes, they are clueless about. And so that was it was only one comment that was that. Everything else was very positive and people just seemed to be wanting more. So I ended up doing panels. I did panel discussions where I had Black introverted leaders. I did one with just Black women introverts. So everything has been really, really, really accepted and really appreciated.
I know that's good. That's good. Now I'm very curious as to, you're an introvert and you get into marketing and communications. That just seems like the most opposite thing for any introvert to get into. So, I mean, what was the driving force behind you choosing to get into marketing?
What's interesting is there are a lot of very successful marketing, communications, and PR people who are introverts. And so that's another thing. I think it's a misconception that just because you're in communications, you need to be the most outgoing and the most gregarious. You don't. You know, if it's your love and it's your passion and what you enjoy doing, then do it. It doesn't matter what your personality type is. But the way I was led there was I was always a good student, especially like in English and writing. So when I went to college, I started out in the College of Business, which was just not good for me. I got my first D in my life in economics. It was awful. It wasn't for me. And then I found out somebody, a counselor said to me, what are you great in? And I was like, English and writing. And she was like, well, what do you think about journalism? I was like, huh. So I went that route. And then when I got into journalism, there were other courses. There were advertising, public relations, marketing, all of these things. And I just fell in love with marketing and, trying to figure out my audience and figure out the audience, whatever it is, if you're working at a university or a corporation or a nonprofit, who's your audience and what do you need to give them to compel them to act? What do you need to get to do to make them buy this product, to make them enroll in this school, to make them register for whatever, to come to this walk? And so that is just something that is, and I don't know if it has anything to do with introversion. It's just something that's very cool to me and a challenge. So when I take positions, I usually look for that where I see a challenge where if they're struggling with their enrollment at their college, I feel like I can get in there and figure out, and maybe this is part of my introversion, I can get to the middle of the beauty. I can find the joy. I can find something in there that maybe everybody else isn't seeing. And maybe that's my observation. And then I figure out how to spotlight it, how to write about it, how to build some compelling messaging that makes people want to act. And so that is how I ended up in marketing and why I will always stay in marketing. Because I love that and the whole storytelling and changing a narrative and building a narrative and building a brand and all of that. So it's just in me, and I don't really know why, but I really love marketing.
So what role do you play in the marketing department per se? Like, are you more in the copywriting side of things? Or what's the
No, I'm the executive director. In the last couple positions, I've been vice president or executive director, so I'm usually leading the team. But I have done everything, and I worked at an ad agency, a global agency. It's called Leo Burnett, where it was like the boot camp to me for advertising and marketing, where I was the very lowest on the totem pole. And my job was we had these branding experiences where Disney was one of our clients and Procter and Gamble. And we would have these sessions, brainstorms where like the top 10 executives fly into Chicago or we fly to them. We often, excuse me, flew to Disney to do these sessions and they would be trying to figure out a challenge, whether it's something in the parks or whatever it was with the ticket prices, with how do we reach Black audiences, how do we reach different people. And so I was the one that was building the environment. So my role was very minimal, but I think I learned so much from that. So I would go to the toy store and buy toys and games and things because I learned from my boss who talked about in the beginning of the session, she had all of the C-suite executives on the floor playing with slinkies and clay and all of these things. And she said it was very intentional to bring them to the same level. Because when you're in the room with the CEO, you got to be buttoned up. You want to be perfect. You want to say all the right things. You want to do all the right things. And this was sort of an exercise that would bring everyone together on the same level, establish a level of comfort and confidentiality, all of that. And that is how we started. So I would have to buy that stuff. I put pictures on the wall, depending on whatever it was. And so that is where some of my learning began. And then ultimately I got promoted. I was a producer and moved up and up. And then my career has just excelled since then.
I love it. I love it. I love it. So, I mean, so far, I mean, I've really enjoyed this conversation with you. And for an introvert, you definitely seem very outspoken. So, I mean, I would not have
Are you saying
guessed you.
are you saying I talk too much? Is that what you're saying?
A little, just get a little bit. Just kidding, just kidding, just kidding, just kidding. No, I actually know you're a phenomenal guest here. And I sent you these questions, but these are the, as we wrap up here, the dumb, fun questions, right? So I love asking this because, it's an interesting catch and it's very gives the ability to kind of put some fun in the podcast. So have you ever tried to be an extrovert for a day?
Yes and no. So in my 20s, when I wasn't as mature as I am now, I absolutely masqueraded as an extrovert when I was in this huge global PR agency because I thought that's what I needed to be to succeed. It was not. And I was exhausted. It's exhausting trying to be someone that you're not. And so I was in this agency and it was a bunch of people that didn't look like me. And they were all bouncing off the walls and giggly and had all of this personality. I've got a lot of personality, but I don't show it in the way that they did. Their lives were very different from mine. And so we go out for Thai every Friday. We do all of this. We go to these bars. I was absolutely exhausted in my 20s because I was trying to be something that I was not. And I
Mm,
learned from that experience and I figured out how to use my skills. So the one thing that came out of that job, which was great, is I learned how creative I was and all of these strengths that I started to build on. So even with the interview for this job, I always write the best cover letters. And it's because I'm doing my research. I'm figuring out what they want to hear and I'm putting it in there. That might have to do with marketing too. But when I got the in-person interview, the person on her desk had a box of Arm& and Hammer baking soda, where you might have it in your refrigerator. And so I'm
mhm,
a curious introvert. And I said, why do you have this box here? And she said, we are pitching to a new client, Arm& and Hammer. So I'm putting it here so that I can um, maybe it'll stem some ideas or, start some ideas. And I was like, okay. That night, I went and drove out to, it's like a Sam's Costco place because I had seen the biggest box of Arm& and Hammer baking soda did you ever want to see. It was a 10-pound box. So I thought, what a great impression if I could send her this box. It would be funny. She would remember me. Maybe I'll get the job. And that's exactly what happened. So I bought the 10-pound box of Arm& and Hammer baking soda. I went to the post office the next day. I mailed it and I included my thank you note. And of course, when I started at the agency, I already had a positive reputation because people were like, oh, that's the girl that sent the Arm& and Hammer the 10 pounds because it was creative. The
uh,
boss loved it. And so it was a great way to start. And so I learned that I was much more creative than I thought I was. And that goes
mm,
back to observation because I observed on her desk and asked what it was about. So I wrote a note, something like, hope this helps you come up with the ideas, hope you get the business, blah, blah, blah. And, but that is the place where I was trying to be someone that I was not. And I think that I was overwhelmed. I was exhausted. It was a public relations agency where I was pitching to 400 radio stations every day. And I was pitching, our client was an asthma drug. It was a pharmaceutical company and I was pitching. It was awful. I hated it. It's the
wow.
only job that I've ever hated. But like your dad, I got something out of it. I grew
Mm,
from that. I learned from that. But the environment was not good for me because again, I was trying to be someone that I was not. And then the work was not something that was meaningful to me. And so I knew I had to get up out of there because it just wasn't for me. And then when I went to the next place, then I felt like I was a little more comfortable in my skin and better with that. But other than that, no, I never try to act like I'm an extrovert, but I did it. I did it for some months there and it was exhausting.
interesting, interesting. Okay, no, I like that. So, I mean, the takeaway from that is whatever interview you're in, find what's in there, order the biggest one you can, and mail it to them. No, 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 no. But I definitely like the part that you basically, um, because I think in business and a lot of people try to pretend to be something that you're not.
Yep.
And the more you do that, the more you lose yourself. The more you lose yourself, the more unhappy you become in that
Yes.
position. No, I definitely agree with you on that. All right, let's go into the second question. This is an interesting one here. So, do you think being an introvert helps you enjoy solitary activities like eating a whole pizza alone?
Well, pizza is my favorite food on earth.
Huh?
Pizza. I have never eaten a pizza by myself, and I don't need to. But I will, of course, wrap it up and have leftovers and eat it the next day and the next day. I think being an introvert does help you appreciate things in solitude. Being in solitude, usually for us, is how we recharge. We
Mm,
don't need anything, I think, special. People, like, we don't need any special treatment. We don't need any special accommodations. We don't need any medication or anything just because we are introverted. But what we need is to recharge because all of the energy that's taken from us, all of these activities and whatever's happening during the day, replenishes it. We lose so much. And so we have to replenish our energy. And so I think back to your pizza, I think that I experience things differently as an introvert because I'm just so much more in tune. So when I think maybe others are eating pizza, maybe they're just gobbling it down. Me, I am
mm,
enjoying every bite, every piece. And if I am in solitude watching something I want to watching Ted Lasso, watching whatever I'm watching on TV, I am tasting that crust and that cheese and that gooey and whatever sausage, and I'm tasting the butter. And so I think that there's something to be said about enjoying things alone, and the experience where you're not distracted by other people and other things. So I do think there's something to be said about enjoying food, enjoying movies, enjoying different things, shopping, even traveling alone.
mm.
Is there something I think magical in that some people just would never do? I think you observe more, you feel more, your sensations I think are heightened, and because you're not distracted by other people and other things.
Interesting. Have you ever tried pineapple on your pizza?
That sounds gross. No. So I've heard of it. It sounds disgusting. Is it?
No, my girlfriend she eats pineapple on pizza, and I did a survey, and I asked a few people, I'm like, would you eat? They're like, oh my God, no. But yeah, no, that's her favorite thing is pineapple on pizza and cold pizza. So listen, it's
Gross.
just
Well, I know it's a thing. I know people eat it, so I know it's a thing. So she's not strange. People eat it, but I don't want any of that.
yeah, no, it's funny. Well, Jerry, it was an absolute phenomenal. It was great having you on. Is there anything you want to? Yeah, where can people find you?
Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it. So you can find me at Hushloudly. So my website is hushloudly.com. But my podcast can be found on Apple Podcasts, Audible, anywhere you find podcasts. Just look for Hush Loudly. And on LinkedIn, where I do a lot of posting, it's just my name, Jeri Bingham. Instagram is Hush Loudly. So I'm around saying things, and I don't have anything planned yet, but I have lots of panels and all kinds of things coming up in the future. So thank you for that.
Perfect. So I'm gonna include the links to the LinkedIn and the podcast um, on in the description, guys. So if you want to go ahead and check, if you like what what she's preaching, what she's saying, and you want to hear it, and you wanna go ahead and send her a few LinkedIn messages to try pineapple pizza. Check the link in the description, guys. And Jerry, it was an absolute pleasure having you on.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure meeting you. Bye bye.